It's early in 2026, and this year I want to start my painting journey more into colour. This is a small painting I call Silent Clearing. I've always liked working with blues. They bring a sense of calm to me, so I let that feeling guide this painting. In this piece, I wasn't trying to paint a specific place. I just wanted that moment in a forest where the light finds its way in, where the water keeps moving but everything else feels still. It's calm, a peaceful forest, somewhere you'd pause just to heal. This is a small piece, 25 by 35 centimeters. I wanted to start quickly, just make something fast and feel good about finishing it. I'm working on a stretched canvas that I picked up from a local art store. I start by sketching everything in dark blue. I like using a colour that already belongs to the main palette of the painting. It helps everything feel more connected right from the beginning. I begin in the middle at the small waterfall, that's where the movement is. From there, I sketch out the rocks, letting them guide the flow of the water. Then I block in the larger trees on the left and right. They act as the framing elements in this piece. Before this, I did a quick digital thumbnail just to test the color harmony. So at this stage, I'm really just transferring those ideas onto the canvas. This is the first layer of the painting. Before I begin, I like to pre-mix my colours. It helps me stay focused and keeps the process flowing. By mixing everything beforehand, the colours stay more consistent and closer to what I planned in the digital sketch. If you want to paint along with me, I share my colour mixing notes on Patreon. You can also find the full real-time painting there from start to finish. I usually begin from the darks. In this case, I start with the tree leaves at the top, keeping them more silhouetted. The blue I'm using here is a transparent blue, so I let the thickness do the work. Thicker paint for darker values. Thinner paint for lighter, more translucent passages. Now it's time to work on the background. I switched to lighter paint here, thinking more about atmosphere than detail. The background stays lighter in value because it sits further away from us. As I move closer to the middle of the painting, the colours get lighter as well. That area is the focus, so I want the light to live there. When I paint the background, I avoid using just one flat value. I look for small shifts, light against slightly darker. That kind of variation helps suggest detail, even when nothing is clearly defined. It feels fuller, less empty. Around the tree trunks, I slow down a little. I need to reserve those areas for darker values later. That contrast is what will keep the trees more silhouetted and keeps the painting more interesting to look at. Here I like switching between two brushes, a larger one for loose shapes and a smaller one for subtle breaks. That back and forth adds variety and keeps the background from feeling stiff. On the right side, I keep things a little darker. That helps bend the focus from the foreground into the middle and then gently toward the left. The left side stays lighter and the darker values on the right act almost like a wall, nudging the eye back into the painting. I like this approach more than placing the focus smack in the middle. It feels more natural, a little more interesting. Just like before, I keep adding variety, small value shifts, broken shapes. Enough to keep the surface alive without making it busy. Here, I'm mostly working with a cheap square-tipped sable brush. It's one of my favorites. I can block in larger areas quickly, and when I need smaller marks, I just use the tip. There will be some bushes here, but for now, I'm only blocking them in with darker paint. The right side of this tree will stay mostly empty. Too much detail here would pull attention away from the focal area. Sometimes leaving space is just as important as adding marks. In this area here, I add some lighter flying leaves, just to give it a softer, more dreamy feel. Since I'm working alla prima, it's a little hard to keep everything clean. So for now, this is good enough. Now it's time to paint the trees. At this stage, it's really important to keep the values separate from the background. That separation is what makes the trees read as trees. Even though they sit in shadow, I'm painting them a little lighter in value. I keep reminding myself where the light is coming from. In this painting, the sun is coming from the left, so the left side of the tree trunks needs to stay lighter. I also make sure to reserve the right side so I can paint it with darker values cleanly later. On this side, the tree feels more like a silhouette because it's set against the lighter background I painted earlier. And right now, the background here isn't quite light enough. You can see the tree doesn't read as clearly yet, but that's okay. I'll fix that in a later stage. This tree here is one of the main elements in the painting. I want it to stand out a little more, so I introduce warmer colours, more reds, more browns, just enough to separate it from the cooler trees around it. It's very important to vary the values as I work, light against dark, small marks and bigger marks. That variation will help suggest the texture of tree bark later. This other tree is also fairly large, so let me add some warmth here as well, but not as much. I want the focus to stay on the main tree in the middle. With the background finished, I move on to the middle layer. When painting landscapes, I find it easier to work from back to front. I let the middle layer slightly overlap the edges of the background, and later the foreground will overlap this again. That layering helps everything feel cleaner and more organized. Since this area sits closer to us, I start introducing more colour. This bush here gets a bit more green. Still pale, but enough to start introducing some colours to it. This middle section is the water area. I'm actually using the same green as the bushes. It might sound a little strange, but it helps keep the colours working in harmony. On the other side of the river, I add more bushes and more grass. This bush here I keep darker and more silhouetted. It helps frame the lighter area above it. And finally, I add more bushes between the rocks and the background layer, just enough to connect and tie everything. Now let's move on to the rocks. I start in the middle section here, trying to connect them with the bushes and the background behind. Since these are rocks, I switch to more greyed down colours. Then I move to the larger rocks in the front, starting from the left side. Just like the bushes above, I keep this one darker. For the closer rocks, let's actually paint the shadow side first. I do this for all of them. By simply dividing the rocks into light and shadow, their forms already start to read. Once that's in place, I add the lighter values on top to complete the shapes. I do the same on the other side of the river, but here, because the light is stronger, the rocks stay lighter. This time, I try to paint the rocks one at a time, just to show how simple it can be, and there is no right or wrong to paint rocks. Focus on light and dark, and let a bit of imperfection in for the texture. With all those elements in place, there's just one thing left, the river. This part is fairly straightforward. I mostly use horizontal strokes, zigzagging as the water moves through the scene. To save time, I switch to a larger flat brush. And just like with the rocks, I start with the darks. I map them in first, choosing slightly different values so the darks aren't all the same. Once that's down, I move into the lighter values using the same brush. Toward the front, I push the lights a little more. That extra contrast keeps the area interesting and helps bring it forward. And finally, I add a few rock reflections. Not too much, mostly just the lighter parts. I'm not painting the whole rock, just enough to suggest what's there. A day has passed. I let the painting rest and allow the first layer to fully dry. Now I'm working wet on dry. The first thing I focus on is strengthening the shadows. Because the dark paint I used earlier is transparent, I can layer the same color again to push the shadows deeper. This process is called glazing. I work my way from the top trees down toward the bottom, deepening the shadows across the entire painting. Working this way helps me keep things clean, as I don't accidentally pick up lighter colours on my brush and the glazes stay clear. As you can see, the contrast starts to increase. The painting feels deeper now, more solid, more present. Next, I push the rocks a little brighter and introduce more colour variation to bring them to life. To push the contrast even further, I start bringing the lights up. I begin in the middle, at the small waterfall. I keep the touches light and deliberate. I also add smaller lights here and there, suggesting gentle ripples on the water. Around the darker bushes, I add a few light marks, hinting at wild flowers. I remember this tree here blends too much into the background, so now I'm fixing that. I push the lights in this grass, letting it catch more sunlight. And let's not forget to add even more flying leaves, just to make it feel more magical. It might just be grass catching the light, but this area is one of the focal points. So I push it brighter and add a few grass blades. And while I'm here, I brighten the water nearby as well. I know I said I'd leave this area empty, but right now it feels a bit too quiet, so I add a few wildflowers as well. The main tree in the middle still feels a bit too simple, so I start layering more colour into it. That brighter area in the centre is the trunk catching the light. To make it read better, I deepen the greys around it. And then push the highlight even brighter where the sun hits. I like how everything feels now, how the pieces start to sit together. The grass catches the light, guiding the eye from a distance. The small waterfall keeps the scene moving without breaking the calm. The rocks hold everything in place, and the bright, flying leaves add a touch of quiet magic to this silent clearing.